Good evening, everyone. My name is Reina Desai, and I am the Assistant Artistic Director of Savitri Theatre Group. Welcome to Savitri Theatre's project, Conversations and Connections. We begin by acknowledging the land on which we gather and which the region of Peel operates is a part of the treaty lands and the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. For thousands of years, Indigenous peoples inhabited and cared for this land. In particular, we acknowledge the territory of the Anishinaabeg, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe Chippewa peoples, the land that is home to the Métis, and most recently, the territory of the Credit First Nation, who are direct descendants of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We're grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land, and by doing so, give our respect to its first inhabitants. Savitri's project, Conversations and Connections, has been conceptualized by multidisciplinary artist Anuradha Verma and Sharda Ishwar and produced by Savitri Theatre. Conversations and Connections seeks to build relationships between and amongst Mississauga artists across various artistic disciplines through the presentation of the artist's works and through dialogue to share knowledge and explore collaborations. This is the third of 5 such presentations. Previously, we presented Carnatic vocalist Srinidhi Sridharan and multidisciplinary artist Sid Sawant. And tonight, we bring you a presentation by writer and visual artist Hana Shafi, also known as Frizzkid. Hana's presentation will be followed by a conversation with Anuradha Verma. After their conversation, we will continue with questions from our online viewers in real time. The series would not have been possible without the support of Lata Pada, Sampradaya Dance Creations, the city of Mississauga, and our live stream team of the Open Space and Honor Productions. We hope you enjoyed the presentation. Please share, like, follow us on Facebook, Insta, Twitter, etc. Thank you for being here tonight. I will now hand it over to Anuradha Verma.
Thanks, Reina. Good evening, folks. It is a weird thing to be hosting this kind of event virtually. But we are here, and hopefully that means we are being broadcast into the comfort of your living room. Maybe you are curled up on the couch. Maybe you've got a cat beside you, like Hana does tonight. And, you know, on a night like tonight, rather than pick up your copy of Hana's book, you can actually just listen to her read from it tonight. I'm really delighted to be able to introduce her. I'm a big fan, and I think that Mississauga definitely needs to be hearing more from Hana. Let me tell you a little bit about her. So Hana Shafi is a writer and an artist who illustrates under the name Frizzkid. If you have seen an affirmation somewhere on social media, especially Instagram, you're probably seeing Frizzkid's work. You're probably seeing Hana's work, whether or not it's credited, but that's a bigger conversation. Both her visual art and her writing frequently explore themes such as feminism, body politics, racism, and pop culture. She's published articles in publications such as The Walrus, Hazlitt, and This Magazine, and has been featured on BuzzFeed, CBC, Flair Magazine, The New York Times, and Shameless. Known on Instagram for her weekly affirmation series. It's excellent, you must check it out. She's also the recipient of the Women Who Inspire Award from the Canadian Council for Muslim Women. Her first book, It Begins with the Body, really lovely, you should pick this up, was selected by CBC Books as one of the best poetry books of 2018. Her second book, Small, Broke, and Kind of Dirty, is in stores now, and it's a wonderful collection of both essays and illustrations. So I have lots that I want to ask Hana, but I think that it's probably better for us to hear from you first. Let's hear a little bit of a reading from this book, and then we have so many questions to answer, especially for our emerging artists who are tuning in, who want to know, how did you get to this second book? So I'll pass it over to you, Hana.
Hey, I'm so excited to be here. I have 2 cats with me. I got one sleepy cat here and another sleepy cat there. So they're my little audience, since I don't really get much of a in-person audience anymore, but they're good listeners, so that's okay. So I'm going to be reading today from Small, Broke, and Kind of Dirty. This came out September 22nd, and it's in stores now. And if you do want to buy this book, I really encourage you to seek out local independent bookstores to support during the pandemic, because those are the kinds of shops that are struggling the most. So There's a lot of different types of essays in here. There's everything from friendship to self-love to more sort of heavy political subjects. And so I'm going to try to give all of you a good mix of all of that, a little flavor of each. And if someone on the technical end can just keep track of time so that I don't go way over, that would be awesome. But I'm also keeping track of time. Okay, so let's just get started. The first one I'm going to read is from the chapter called On Politics. My favorite part of the St. Catharines climate strike rally, which took place September 27th, 2019, in conjunction with the global climate strike, was a young boy who took the stage. These kids were eager to get on the mic, and not for selfish purposes. It was clear they really cared about climate justice. And fair enough. It's their future that looks the most bleak after all, and many of them are currently suffering from an existential dread that no child should ever have to contend with. Most of us didn't grow up wondering if we were going to make it to adulthood. Anyway, this one kid got on the mic and went off on a clumsy rant about the use of plastic. Plastic, what even is this? What the heck? It sounded silly, but he had amazing insights. He pointed out that there are many biodegradable alternatives to plastic. So many, in fact, that there is no good reason why so much of this stuff should be ending up in the ocean. We have the science, the innovative brain power to create biodegradable alternatives that wouldn't harm ocean life. Part of my reaction to this kid's talk was weirdly maternal. Oh, look at that sweet little child. I must protect him. But the other part was a bit of sadness. When I was a child, I wasn't thinking about the ills of pollution. Sure, we learned about recycling in school and loving the planet and not being a litter bug, but we were unaware that as we lived in blissful ignorance, the planet was being degraded, and that it was only a matter of time before that degradation became irreversible. I was in St. Catharines for a mini art show I was doing at a cafe owned by a friend of a friend. Bummed that I was missing the Toronto climate strike, I asked my friend if anything was happening locally. Before she could even get back to me, I got a message from one of the organizers. They learned I was going to be in town for the show and asked if I would speak for a few minutes at the rally. I jumped at the opportunity. I even had a poem I'd written about climate justice that I was prepared to read. And my poem was cool and all, but this kid musing over a piece of plastic garbage he found on the ground, loudly exclaiming, "What the heck?" over and over, was 10 times better than anything I have ever written. And the fact that he never said hell or damn, not even once, just added to the freaking wholesome nature of the entire thing. Kids had skipped school to attend this strike. I looked at my friends. Why didn't we do this stuff? I asked. We didn't know. It's true to a degree. I was in high school when Stephen Harper was Prime Minister, and his government put gags on a lot of Canada's climate scientists. These educated, intelligent, aware human beings weren't permitted to speak out on the dangers of prioritizing profit over the well-being of our planet. What if they'd been free to sound off? Would we have been organizing strikes and marches too? I want to believe we would have, but I'm not so sure. It was a different time. We didn't have today's young activists to look up to, the Autumn Peltiers and the Greta Thunbergs. Kids today are lucky and unlucky. Lucky that they have role models like this to galvanize them, but unlucky that there's a need to be galvanized in the first place. When I was around the age of the young boy who took the mic, my biggest concern was whether I was going to miss the latest episode of That's So Raven. I thought the height of activism was carrying that little UNICEF box when we went trick-or-treating on Halloween. My anxiety centered on getting whipped in the face by a jump rope during double dutch at recess. And we were angriest at the school administration when they banned Red Rover because some kid in another school had apparently broken his arm while playing. When I first skipped school, it was to go to the mall, and I felt super guilty after. This is the simpleness of childhood. It's not that I didn't think about complicated things growing up, or that I had the perfect life. It's just that I didn't worry about the possibility of a non-existent future. I dreamed without concern of what the world would look like in my 20s and 30s. I assumed it would only get better, that progress would always march forward, that we would never take steps back. Now I have legitimate dread about the future. My friends and I joke, what's the point of saving for a home when we're going to be living in a post-apocalyptic hellscape anyways? It is easy to let climate apathy overtake you. It's easy to wonder if there's any point in fighting. Rent is too high, wages haven't matched the inflation on the cost of living, the world is burning, fanboys ruined the magic of Star Wars, and Cats was the scariest movie ever made. So what's the point of living? I have two reasons to keep on keeping on. One is spite. I refuse to let the inaction and greed of the world's richest, many of whom are decrepit old white men beginning to resemble the Crypt Keeper and Jeff wannabe Lex Luthor Bezos, be the reasons I give up. How can we allow our beautiful planet and our lives to be ruined by a group of gross resource hoarding guys and the wealthy women who are undoubtedly complicit? The answer is that we can't. I am too spiteful for that shit. I hold grudges. The second reason is the little boy at the climate march. Maybe I'm jaded, but he shouldn't have to be jaded. Even though he was concerned, he was also a child with a tremendous amount of hope. After the rally, as my friends and I walked to the local deli to get lunch, we couldn't help but repeat his words, "Plastic, what the heck?" It was like a war cry. We were angry for him. We felt his frustration and absolutely had to, or else nothing would get done. If he was angry, we had the responsibility to make his anger echo, to get other people upset too, because a dying planet is worth getting upset over. If you can't feel rage over the deliberate pillaging of the planet, what then? If the cries of children who worry that they may never see their adulthood don't worry you, what will? If you're apathetic about your future, don't be apathetic about his. Perhaps the reason we millennials are where we are is the apathy of the generations before us. I know Generation Z can be annoying with all their TikToks and confusing lingo. I know sometimes you just want to yell, "Get off my lawn, you damn teenagers," which I almost did when some hooligan 16-year-olds were being annoying outside my apartment. But it's worth remembering that they are also more aware of the ills of the world than many of us were at their age, and seemingly more willing to do something about it. Maybe that excuses a bit of hooliganism now and again. It's like that iconic Simpsons episode where Homer changes Mr. Burns' ominous workplace message from "don't forget you're here forever" to "do it for her," with the her in question being his daughter Maggie. Take a tip from Homer and do it for the little boy who doesn't understand what the fucking point of plastic is. Do it for him. Okay. That is one essay, one down. Okay. So the second one I'm going to read is from the chapter on self-love and healing, which is a more of a warm and fuzzy chapter. Okay. Literally every immigrant family in the greater Toronto area, a big chunk of suburbs and cities with Toronto at its center, is obsessed with going to Niagara Falls. My immediate way of bonding with fellow immigrants in my community is reminiscing over several Niagara Falls trips. Maybe we're all just collectively obsessed with waterfalls or something, but more realistically, it's because of money and the need, as people who feel like outsiders, to soak up the quintessentially Canadian. While more affluent white families were vacationing in Disney World or driving up to a Muskoka cottage, a long weekend for a Desi family, along with an assortment of other nationalities and ethnicities, meant participating in a mass migration to Niagara Falls to take in nature's wonders and all the other gaudy, tacky crap that Niagara has to offer. It's not a far drive, and in some ways, it's the epicenter of Canadiana. One summer, we went up with my cousins and immediately set off to Clifton Hill, home of perpetually sticky arcades, a Ripley's Museum, haunted houses, and that big rainforest cafe that I constantly tried to convince my family to take me to as a kid. I must have been around 10 years old, and my cousins and big sister insisted we all go to this haunted house. My stomach was falling through my ass at the thought of it. But after solidifying my title of wuss by bursting into tears when my parents had tried to get me to take a picture with a man dressed up as an alien a few years earlier, also at Niagara Falls, I needed a redemption arc. I was the youngest of the cousins, and if I didn't prove myself here, they would surely leave me behind when they took off to do cool big kid things. This was it. I'd show everyone I was tough as nails. Except I wasn't. About 30 seconds into the haunted house, a sharp burst of smoke set the creepy mood. I cried and bolted out. My cousins and sister have never let me forget, and the experience has stayed with me too. As much as I wanted to prove myself that day, to show that I could change and grow absolutely without any setbacks, I was still scared of a lot of things, and that wasn't about to change. I was extremely scared of the dark throughout my childhood. So much so that I once begged a family friend to put the nightlight on in her bedroom when I slept over. I was 12 years old. I took urban legends like Bloody Mary and the Candyman very seriously. I was superstitious, paranoid about potentially bad omens, afraid of getting sick, afraid of roller coasters, afraid of so many things that other kids found thrilling and exciting. I was a nervous kid, afraid that I wasn't really normal. Still, I wanted nothing more than to shake off my wuss title. I watched my first scary movie with my neighbor Rona, who is still one of my closest friends. She picked Jeepers Creepers. For those who don't remember, it's a ridiculous early 2000s horror movie about a weird winged creature scarecrow dude who steals people's faces and skin. It's about as over the top as you can get, and quite frankly, it sucks. At the time, though, it disturbed me to my core, and I sprinted home as soon as it was done. We only lived 3 houses apart. Again, not exactly the redemption arc I was craving. Yes, I'd watched the movie, but I was scared to death after. But that's progress, right? You get good at something, and then you suck at it a little toward the end. Still, it's a step in the right direction. I went to my high school's low-budget haunted house every year, screaming my head off and clutching the arms of friends throughout, and probably screwing up their hearing for life. I continued to do this in university, when the lounge for journalism students at Ryerson was converted into a mini haunted house for charity. I didn't exactly maintain a calm demeanor, but I did it. By the time I was in my late teens, I was successfully going through haunted houses and watching horror movies, sometimes even by myself. It didn't matter that after watching a scary movie or reading a scary story on a forum like No Sleep Reddit or Creepypasta, I'd call a friend over because I was too scared to be alone. And it didn't matter that I, quite recently, had to ask my friend to come to the bathroom with me after watching Black Christmas. Well, shit, you never know when there might be a killer hiding behind the shower curtain, all right? I did it. I got past the big scary thing and started to gain control over my fears. I even began to write about horror on a professional level and have become something of a horror expert, a very ironic descriptor for a once chronic scaredy cat. And yes, I'm still a bit of a scaredy cat. I may have cried in the movie theater while seeing the remake of It because clowns are yet another thing I'm afraid of, but I sat through it. I guess you could say I healed. I bumpily and awkwardly and strangely healed. I've healed from bigger things in my life, or at least I'm in the midst of doing so. Those stories, though, are too long and incomplete to share. Those are lifelong personal journeys. But I think about them in the same way I think about how I went from being the kid who cried in front of the alien man, who ran out of that haunted house after making it just a few feet in, and who couldn't sleep at night without the nightlight on, to being a person who writes about and illustrates horror and can successfully sleep in the dark. Well, except in hotel rooms and new places. But hey, healing isn't linear. I'm still getting there. Okay, how are we doing on time? Should I read one more? Should I keep going? Okay. All right. Well, you know what? I'm gonna go to, since this is everyone's watching in Saga, I'll do one that's kind of like also based in like the GTA or like near Saga. So this one is from the first chapter, which is called On Kindness. I went on my first overnight field trip in the 6th grade. Finally, I was going to embark on a quintessential North American white kid rite of passage, camp. We went to this place called Camp Olympia to stay for 2 nights. It was about 2 hours away from my middle school, which was in suburban Mississauga, so not exactly on another planet. But when you go north in Ontario, finally leaving the suburbs and cities of the Greater Toronto Area, everything looks green and the landscape is dotted with farms. If you're not used to it, you think you're hours away from civilization. In my melodramatic child mind, it felt like I was out in the wilderness for 2 intensely dramatic, frightful, disorienting months. It turns out my sheltered brown self, who at the time was rarely allowed to attend sleepovers at other kids' houses, wasn't really ready to become an honorary white kid. As the first day passed, I got increasingly homesick, experienced explosive diarrhea from the crap camp food, and became extremely anxious when even the slightest thing didn't live up to my expectation of what freedom and the great outdoors were supposed to be. I hated the bathrooms, I hated the cabin, I hated the activities. I was clumsy and tired, and I wanted to go home. Not many 11-year-olds have great coping mechanisms for anxiety. Not many adults do either. So when everything was falling to pieces, in my mind at least, and maybe a little in reality as well, it culminated in one massive panic attack. It was past lights out when it happened, and we'd been told repeatedly that there would be severe consequences for any kid who snuck out after curfew. I was a goody two-shoes kind of kid, and getting in trouble was one of my worst fears. Basically, I wasn't cool, not in the least bit. The student cabins were separated from the teachers by a small patch of trees, or what I imagined was the national axe murderer lurking forest. I began to cry. Nope, hyperventilate. Wait, no, it was more like convulsing, just a snotty, breathless, terrifying display of complete and utter 6th grade meltdown. I stood out on the small porch of the cabin wailing for a teacher or a camp counselor, someone to just come help me. I didn't know I was having an anxiety attack because that vocabulary doesn't exist for 11-year-olds. I thought I was dying. My cabin mates didn't know what to do. But one of the girls in the neighboring cabin ran out. She was barely even a friend. After all, she was in the cabin next door with the other cool kids, while me, Madison, my best friend, and the rest of the dork brigade were confined to ours. Miraculously, this popular girl heard my calls. Unlike in the movies, they are not always heartless bitches. And she and Maddie braved their way through the forbidden forest, breaking curfew in doing so, and got a teacher to come and help me calm down. In the midst of that panic attack, I felt utterly alone and entirely humiliated. And yet there were people willing to care for me, not just my best friend, but also a girl who barely knew me. Turns out that even if your pivotal adolescent camp trip turns into a diarrheal, homesick explosion of sadness and becomes the catalyst for a burgeoning anxiety disorder, there's always someone willing to brave a potential student suspension and a serial killer tree patch for you. I'll never forget that. And I'm sure, much to my dismay, that those who witnessed my camp breakdown will never forget it either. Okay. How are we doing? Another one? Not another one? One more. Okay. One more. This one is also one from the chapter on politics. I used to think that girlhood was a competition. I used to think that being a woman was akin to taking part in the Hunger Games, that we were all fighting so desperately for survival that it was every woman for herself. I used to resent other girls as an adolescent. I used to think other girls were vapid and shallow, and that it was okay if I was ugly because I was intelligent and they were brainless. This is how I used to think when I was growing up. I was horribly insecure about the way I looked. I was not popular. I was not well liked by boys, and I didn't know what to do with those feelings. So I did what society has told all of us young girls to do. I competed with every girl in sight. According to the rules of the game I was playing, without ever questioning why I was playing it, I was 15 years old after all. Another girl could not thrive because doing so would mean she was stamping out my bloom. Where did I get this crazy idea? It's what we're all shown. Betty and Veronica are always competing for Archie's love in the comics and on Riverdale. Lizzie competes with Kate for Ethan Craft's love in Lizzie McGuire. Raven's tormentors are always popular girls on That's So Raven. Regina George is an evil bitch who backstabs Katie to get to Aaron Samuels. Do these references give away just how much of a millennial I am? And how utterly screwed it is that this is the messaging that little girls grow up on? Frenemies, catfights, women who don't play well with other women. We are raised to internalize every bit of this. Reality, though, is different. Yes, there are mean girls and there are women who bully other women. But when I was busy thinking of other girls, but when I was busy thinking of other girls as my competition, and when all the other girls I knew were doing the same damn thing, boys were walking all over us. Boys were calling us ugly. Boys were calling us bitches. Boys were rating girls with numbers. Boys were spreading slut-shaming rumors. Boys were calling every disagreement between two girls a catfight. Boys and their bro groups, which, by the way, were heralded for having less drama than female friendship circles, had that kind of camaraderie because they actually had plenty of examples of male camaraderie to pull from. Every boy group was the A-Team, or the Hardy Boys, or Ocean's 11, or the Justice League, or Holmes and Watson, the Three Musketeers, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Maverick and Goose, Batman and Robin, the Goonies, the Lost Boys, you name it. This is why girl friendships are so important, because each one subverts the idea that we are all in competition with each other, that we can't all grow, that we can't all be successful or desired or worthy. Girl friendships are vital. They're revolutionary. Don't be that woman who says she's not like other girls and can't befriend other women because there's just too much drama. The drama in question here is just internalized misogyny. Patriarchy is the drama, my dude. When a group of boys has their friendship destroyed or their group falls apart in some way or another, it's never blamed on the drama of the boys. Nope, it's blamed on the girlfriend, the woman who comes in to infiltrate and destroy. The Yoko Ono, the Courtney Love. Newsflash, there is enough room for all of us, enough resources for all of us if we take them and demand them instead of allowing a racist patriarchy to adopt only a few of us as a meaningless token of diversity. Why are we Betty and Veronica fighting over Archie when we could all be Destiny's Child or the Spice Girls or insert current example so I seem more cultured with the times? I just thought of one, She-Ra, the She-Ra reboot. When we submit to the notion of the competition, we allow ourselves to fight in this gladiator stadium for everyone else's entertainment rather than nurture each other for our own growth and well-being. Don't be Lizzie and Kate when they fight over Ethan. Why not be that episode when they make Latvian food together and laugh and have fun in a cute montage? Stop pointing your weapons at each other, ladies. Instead, point them at the white supremacist patriarchy and tear that shit down. Okay, that's just a few samples.
Thanks, Hannah. That was amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love the selection that you picked from here. I really love like bouncing around through the different chapters, and some of them are like my favorite ones. I was really happy to read those. And I want to say, I feel like I've told you this before, and I hope our watchers now and later will appreciate this, is you're so funny. Like you're so funny in both your writing style and also how you're kind of performing or sharing it with all of the audience. So I really appreciate that, especially when it is such a challenging, difficult time. It's really hard to find joy and it's really hard to find humor. So I just want to say thank you for doing some uplifting of my spirit today.
Well, thank you for thinking I'm funny, because I think I'm funny. Like, I laugh at my own jokes all the time, and I'm always scared that like no one else is laughing.
No, we're laughing. We're laughing for sure.
Good.
So, and I see in the comments, like folks are saying thank you, and they really loved your essays. One of the things I want to say to folks who want to pick this up is how powerful it is to read the essays and then to look at the illustrations that go along with each of them. It's like such a lovely way of like
accompanying lots of color in this book.
Yeah.
Lots of color, which is, I think, really lovely.
And it's great for, kind of, I guess, stimulating multiple senses, right? Because I think sometimes, especially I think in a pandemic, lots of folks are saying to me, either they're like reading all the time or they're not able to read at all. Yeah. And so something where they can look at a colorful picture, read a really powerful affirmation, because these are affirmations for the real world after all, and have that kind of joined with a really powerful essay that's really asking all of us to be reflecting on the world that we are building together every day. So my first kind of question, I think it would be helpful for folks here to know kind of a little bit about your journey. So how did you get to where you are right now? Tell us about that.
Yeah, there's been, it's a long journey. I mean, for one, it's worth noting that I didn't go to art school. I went to school for journalism. So if you have a dream you really want to pursue, just know that like institutional type of education is not the only path you have to take. There's other ways you can get there. I think that's really important to tell people. So yeah, I didn't go to art school. I was just kind of drawing on my own time when I was in school for journalism. And I knew that illustration was something that I was deeply passionate about. And I did journalism for a while, and I do occasionally still write freelance articles, but I felt that I wasn't really scratching that itch to do that more sort of like fun creative work, And so initially when it came to the first book, I had always kind of had this idea of putting out a book of poetry. And back in the day, when I was in high school, I started doing poetry slams with the Mississauga Library. And it was like the first time they had ever done that. It was a brand new sort of like program. And I think I did it, I think 2 years or 3 years in a row, which is super cool. And yeah, I kind of knew like I really wanted to make a book of poetry, but I had an idea, I had like themes, and I had some work, but I was just unsure of the process. And so I had applied for a mentorship with Vivek Shreya, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with that name because she's kind of a superstar. But if you're not familiar, she is an amazing South Asian artist and writer and playwright and singer. Like, she does it all, and she's an absolutely wonderful person. So I had applied for a mentorship with her, and I got accepted. And so what we did was she kind of like she looked over my poems. She helped me hone my poetic kind of craft. And then I was like, how do I go about getting something like this published? And so she kind of helped me like build up all the technical stuff, like book proposals and pitches and CVs and all that. And then sort of helped me kind of like take that leap and approach publishers. And so I couldn't really do it without her. And I think it's really amazing when someone from the community like looks out for you. Like, she had those resources, and so she wanted to pay it forward, which I think is amazing. And she's still doing that. She now has an imprint with, I think, Arsenal Pulp Press called VS Books, and she's still doing mentorships, which is amazing. So if you're, an author or just an artist who's interested in that stuff, like, look for mentorships, look for people in the community who want to share their knowledge with you. So yeah, that's kind of how this all got started. I ended up pitching my first book, and Book Hug Press was like, yeah, we love this. We want you to work on this, and we're going to publish it. And then it went from there. And then I decided, you know what, I really want to get back into essay writing, because I did a lot of essay writing in journalism, and it was one of my strong suits. And I thought it was a good way to compile some of the some of my favorites, but also some of the most popular affirmation pieces I've done, and then add some sort of like context and storytelling to really ground the pieces and make them come to life in a different way.
Amazing. Thank you. I love that you're talking about mentorship. And I will always say, you know, I love to claim Vivek with the Mississauga connection because she lived briefly in Mississauga.
We did.
And she's also had her work shown at the Art Gallery of Mississauga. She's performed at the Pride in the Square event in Brampton. And certainly she's been someone who, like, I think really understands the nuance of being like a QT BIPOC person, a BIPOC person from an immigrant family, the context of the suburbs, and also all of the barriers that the system put in place.
Getting to work with someone who also culturally understood my work, because you know, there was a lot of poetry that was my that was about my identity as a brown girl and a Muslim woman. And obviously, like Vivek and I, even though we're both South Asian, we come from different experiences and different cultures. But there's still those similarities and that connection. And you know, there is a difference when you're working with someone in your community, like who gets it. I didn't feel like I had to explain everything to her in a way that I probably would have had to do if I had a white person mentoring me. So it was nice to have that immediate connection and someone who was also there to like encourage me to pursue a creative path when, let's be real, it's not something that's super encouraged in South Asian homes. You know, kind of South Asian parents, you know, are a little old school in that sense and are not necessarily ones to push their kids towards creative endeavors because they are more precarious when it comes to like the job stability and the money that comes from it. So someone who's able to be like, hey, I understand that like you may not be getting 100% support to pursue this. And it's also okay if you have like a day job to make up for that. It doesn't make you like a less valid artist. So that was really affirming for me.
Yeah. And I think that's why having you be part of this series has been really important too, because Savitri Theatre, as like the only South Asian theater kind of company or group in Mississauga, actually in all of Peel, I have found that like a lot of folks who are connected to Savitri are also in the same kind of position across ages where there's like a day job and then they're also pursuing creative work. And so much of it, I think, is also introducing audiences to the idea of, you know, being a patron to South Asian artists, to like paying for South Asian performances or creative endeavors, and then really like supporting South Asian arts as a whole here in this country.
It's really important. And I think sometimes when people, let's say who are not South Asian, think of South Asian art, right? Like they kind of just think of like Bollywood. And that's cool and all, but I mean, most of us are not like millionaire celebrities making movies. And South Asian art comes in all different forms because South Asians are not a monolith and we come from a variety of experiences and we can make all types of art. There's no right or wrong way to make South Asian art. And so it's really important that we also get to showcase the diversity in our talent. And that our art is like, you know, I think there's like a colonial standard of like sophistication in art. And so a lot of racialized artists get excluded from that. And I think it's really important that we claim our space because like our art is sophisticated and it is professional. Like we're not little league, we're big league. Like South Asian culture has an intense, beautiful artistic history. Like, and we're honoring that by continuing those traditions.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that. I remember, I'll tell you this little story. Like I went to a City of Mississauga cultural master plan, like community consultation. And there was somebody at the table who was talking about, you know, art dance performances at a South Asian festival, one of the South Asian festivals that happens here. And the person was basically like, is that real art? Like, I mean, I don't even know, like, that's not professional art. And this idea of, you know, emerging versus mid-career versus professional. And part of, you know, this whole project is about breaking down those barriers, but it's also about highlighting to folks where there might be kind of biases in our thinking about who is doing good art. And so
abandon those ideas.
Like, how we have to unlearn it.
We have to unlearn it. I don't think that we should be using elitist Western colonial markers of what art and art patronage looks like. So, you know, for example, I didn't go to art school, and a lot of South Asian kids don't go to art school because their parents are not gonna put them through art school. They're gonna be like, you need to go and like become a lawyer or a doctor. So art school has not always been an option for us, especially because there isn't a lot of money in arts. And a lot of South Asians, especially if you're living in multi-generational homes and there's pressure to provide for the family, like, you know, art's not going to give you that money, unfortunately, because artists are underpaid and are undervalued. And so when we look at these sort of colonial markers of like what a professional artist is, so credentials from a Western institution, like having space in, again, white upper class spaces, i.e. a gallery, like what galleries are prestigious and what galleries are not prestigious. So if we carve our own space and we put, let's say we make a collective and we put all South Asian art up, you show that to, like, let's say a, you know, top of their career white artists, that name, like your collective, doesn't come with any clout because it wasn't part of their institution, their set of galleries, their set of top tier artists. So we need to really, really abandon those standards, because all they do is they push potential out. And I think that there are so many artists who like don't take themselves seriously because like those arbitrary markers of success have convinced them that they're not serious professional artists and that they can't succeed in the same way. So I think for me, it's all about, I cannot define my success by those markers, because those markers of success were not made for a person like me. And like, so screw that. Like, I'm setting my own standards of what success looks like that cater to my lived experience.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to ask you, who do you write for? And who, if we were to think about, you know, who lives in Mississauga, for example, who do you wish was reading your work or looking at your illustrations?
I mean, number one, always I write for myself. I always put myself first in my art. And I encourage all artists to do that. Especially because like you can't inspire change with others if you're not connecting with yourself in that way with your work. Like, it still needs to mean something to you, right? But I'm also very much like writing for other racialized women, and it is work that, like, I do want young brown girls to read my work because I was a young brown girl and work like this did not exist. Like, you couldn't go to Indigo when I was a kid and see brown authors on the shelves. There's so many now. That did not exist when I was younger. That was not a thing. It was just not. I remember being, I was in Dubai visiting family members, and I went to a bookstore there, and there was like all these like different names, like non-white names on the shelves. And I felt so ignorant for a second. So I was like, I can't believe I didn't factor in like that there are probably all these successful racialized authors across the globe, but I've only been exposed to ones that the Western market has deemed good enough. So there's such a small amount. And so I really do want young brown people to read my work. I want young brown girls, young brown non-binary kids, young brown trans kids, young brown boys to read my work, because I think that we need a diverse array of stories in our community, you know? And I hope that they can relate to this work because maybe they're like me, immigrants or children of immigrants, second gen, third gen, whatever. But, there's such interesting work coming out of diasporic authors. And you always want to be able to reach and connect with your community as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to really encourage folks who are watching to get a copy of this book as a, I don't know, holiday present, maybe to a young person in their life.
Young people. There's literally the whole essay about how young people are gonna like save us from climate catastrophe. Let them know that I respect the younger generation. I think they're awesome.
Yeah, I love that kind of hopefulness about the possibilities of intergenerational spaces. And I see a question from someone who's watching. It's actually Sharda who's asking, what do you think of the importance of personal storytelling and memoir?
So, memoir and personal storytelling has gotten really, really popular in the last 10 years among women writers. And when that popularity started to rise, there were a lot of critiques from, you guessed it, male authors and male journalists who were saying that like this was really contrived, self-indulgent, that they were tired of personal storytelling, tired of memoir. I was told in journalism school not to pursue personal essay or write personal essay. And it's interesting because when we look at personal storytelling and memoir from male authors, they are met with a lot of critical acclaim. So, when Hunter S. Thompson was inserting himself into all his work, people were like, so radical, so gonzo. When, oh my God, I forgot his name. It turned into a movie with Ewan McGregor. Trainspotting. The guy who wrote Trainspotting like wrote about that. Again, it was like, this is so raw, this is so vulnerable. And then when women write it, it's like, oh, this is contrite, this is saccharine, this is like, oh, like you're so obsessed with yourself, you think only your stories are the best. And it's like, no, I don't think that's the point of memoir is someone being obsessed with themselves. It's the fact that when we tell personal stories, we find out that our personal stories are actually really universal. Like that's the power of storytelling. It's not that I look at my stories and think my stories are intrinsically unique and no one else has experienced this. I like putting it out there because I like when people message back and go like, I went through something really similar, or like this reminded me of my family's trip to Niagara Falls. Like storytelling is a way to connect. And I think that like we tend to start disregarding genres or mediums when women start dominating them. All of a sudden, they're not special anymore. I mean, look at it when it's a really good example is the way that culinary arts have changed, right? Like when women cook, it's like, oh, well, women have to cook because it's a woman's duty. And then men cook and they become top chefs and they're considered artists. And think about all the like little Desi moms cooking who are also artists and who have really good command of flavor and palate and plating, like, and so I think that personal storytelling is a really, really excellent way to connect with people and a way of orally passing down our histories as racialized women to the next generation.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely want to see more aunties with like YouTube channels, or I had a conversation today about like aunties having podcasts, folks sharing stories, chapbooks, etc. Like that's the thing we need. And I think if we were to look at a place like Mississauga, there would be hundreds and thousands of really important stories to be telling.
An abundance of stories and things that just connect people. And I imagine that a lot of immigrants in Mississauga, regardless of whether they're South Asian immigrants or not, have similar stories. I think there's a lot of similarities when it comes to that immigrant experience in the suburb. There are differences too, because we don't all experience privilege and oppression in the same way. But I think it is a really cool way to create like inter-community solidarity.
Yes. So let's just make more of that happen.
Yeah, more of that needs to happen.
Someone asked a question about where your book can be, where your books can be found. So I know early on you said support independent businesses. In Mississauga, there's only one independent bookstore, which I believe is the Book Wardrobe in the West End, maybe around Streetsville.
Okay.
But where else can folks find?
So, Glad Day Bookshop carries it. I think they just sold out of it, but they will most likely restock. Queen Books carries it. Another Story Bookshop carries it. A Different Book List carries it. So there's a lot, actually. There's a lot of little independent bookstores. And, you know, if you see an independent bookstore and my book is not there, maybe go tell them, hey, like this local artist like made a book and you guys should really stock it here. So they'll probably listen to the consumer. Obviously, for accessibility purposes, if you are not near any bookstores or you can't afford to pay for shipping, you can go to Indigo, and if your local Indigo is out of stock, you can get it shipped for free to a specific Indigo location, so you don't have to pay for shipping. So that is absolutely an option, because I know not everyone can necessarily, you know, drive downtown to a bookstore or pay for shipping. So yeah, it's pretty widely available. And the other option is you can also buy it directly from my publisher, because they obviously have it on their online bookstore, and it is an indie, you know, small press. So.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. If you were to share kind of one lesson or one learning or one piece of advice to a writer or an illustrator in Mississauga who's just starting out, what would you want to say to them?
Just starting out. I think I would say that there's value in your work. There's a lot of value in your work. I think that more young people, especially young girls, need to hear that there is an intrinsic value in what you're doing, even if you decide never to share it, even if you don't make money off of it, because it's hard to sell stuff. I'm like considered an established artist, and I still have a hard time selling things and making money off my profession. So remember that there's value in everything that you do and every creative thing you create, beyond likes, beyond money. Obviously, those things are great to get and they're very gratifying, but there is an intrinsic value in creating art, and you have to value that what you're doing.
Of course you gave an affirmation. Of course you did, Hannah.
I am.
Okay, so I want to actually ask you about the affirmation series, because you made it this like a weekly series, and I want to ask you a little bit about pacing. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that Charlotte, Jasmine, and I have talked about, this series has gone through a few different iterations because the pandemic, I think, has thrown lots of artists, collectives, and arts-based organizations for a loop. I want to ask you like what it means or how it feels to produce work at the pace that you've been producing in the midst of a pandemic.
It's been hard. It's been so hard. I'm tired. And I think it's okay to just admit that. Normally I do an affirmation every week. I posted on my Instagram this week that I wouldn't do one this week because I just can't. I'm burnt out. I don't have the energy for it. And I'm trying to like respect my body's cues when I feel like I don't have the energy. And I think that's really important. So yeah, pacing is difficult because like our whole lives have been thrown off by this. So we can't expect ourselves to really be productive in the same way or to stick with the same routines when so many other aspects of our life are now like totally jumbled, completely chaotic. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I so appreciate the honesty. I feel like there's so much on social media around productivity right now. And like, there's this push, like some of these memes and like so-called inspirational words to be like, if you haven't written that book during the pandemic, what are you even doing? You know?
No, like a pandemic is not a time to make a masterpiece. That's great if you made a masterpiece during a pandemic, but a pandemic is not a time to make a masterpiece. it's a time to survive. Like, this is like bare bones survival. Especially if you're like a frontline worker, you're working a precarious job, like this is tiring. Your main goal should be to like adequately rest and nourish yourself every day, because it's really, really hard when you're experiencing something with seemingly no end in sight. So like if someone's like, oh, I'm gonna make that great thing, I'm kind of like, that's nice and I hope you do, but like set realistic expectations for yourself. This is not the time to paint the freaking Mona Lisa. This is the time to take a nap. Take a nap.
Yeah, we support that. We definitely support that.
Pandemic, like.
I want to ask you one last question, and this actually came from one of the viewers too, is what inspires your visual work? Like, I mean, I especially love the cover, but even all of your affirmations and any of your visual work, you actually posted some stuff that was really kind of like cosmic and psychedelic and cool today. So what inspires you?
It's hard to say, but I think like nature is a big inspiration, because I think plants and animals are a big theme in my work. And I think the other thing that inspires me is just wanting my friends and my community and people around me to feel seen in the work. And so when I draw people, I want to ensure that I'm drawing like a really diverse array of people. Like I want, like sometimes like when I go on an artist page and like everyone they draw is skinny, I'm just like, why is everyone that you draw skinny? That's not real. I don't like it. Like, I'm not Tim Burton. I'm not gonna make everyone aesthetic and white, because that's Tim Burton vibes. No disrespect, I love Beetlejuice, but let's be real. Like Tim Burton like admitted to like not casting Black people in his movies because it doesn't fit with his aesthetic. And for me, like, no. I think like my inspiration and art philosophy is the opposite. I think that we need to like start seeing bodies that we view as like not aesthetically pleasing as aesthetically pleasing, because they are. Like, how is a fat body not aesthetic? How is a disabled body not aesthetic? Like, that's art too. And we see that also in like the white Western canon of like great artists, of the women that were typically depicted in paintings. And like a big inspiration for me is to subvert that completely, and change how we view masterpiece and change how we view beautiful portrait. And I think like a really good example that I think a lot of people can grasp is like Frida Kahlo, like really subverted that in purposely drawing herself in a way that was very hyper detailed. Like she actually, for example, like made like her facial hair and things like that darker in her paintings than they were in real life, because I think she did want to subvert that idea of like what beautiful painted masterpiece looked like, what beauty looked like, if beauty was even relevant, if beauty was even necessary to make great art. So I would say like those are my inspirations, is like wanting to depict all the beautiful people around me, regardless of whether they fit with an Instagram aesthetic, and nature, because I love nature.
Well, thank you for that. And I know I can speak on behalf of Jasmine and Sharda and I to say that you definitely inspire us. Your work inspires us, and who you are inspires us today and every day. So thank you for being here. I wish you rest. I wish you so much rest.
I wish that for you too.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So we're going to wrap up another Conversations and Connections with Savitri Theatre, but we want you to make sure you save the date next Monday night at 7 p.m. There will be a performance by Tifa Wine and the Kitika Dance Company. So again, across this multidisciplinary artistic journey. So we'll have drag and dancers, and then a Q&A afterwards. Please watch this video, share it with your friends. It'll be on the Savitri page anytime after tonight in case someone was busy. And in the meantime, get a copy of this wonderful collection of essays. Curl up on the couch with something warm to drink, not eggnog if you're Hana Shafi and can't have dairy. Maybe a hot chocolate without dairy, and enjoy.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.